Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar with Informa Connect Academy, which is Right to Win, Transform Business Messages into Action. We're really pleased that you've spent your afternoon to join us today, and we want this session to be as interactive as possible. It's always great when we hear the opinions of those who are in the field and the issues that you have, so we can make this session as applicable and give you as much value as possible. So please, in the chat, and just make sure that your messages in the chat, your box, has been selected to everyone. We'd love to know where you're coming from, where you're joining us from today, city or country, all the rest of it. That would be really great. So please put in the chat where you're joining us from today so we can have a bit of interaction from our audience. Thank you so much. And if you just change the box, if you just toggle the box to everyone and not to host and panelists so that everyone can see your responses as well. So we do have Pakistan and Bangkok. We've got Saudi Arabia. Okay. Coming in. Fantastic. Okay, so lots of the questions are coming in. UAE, fantastic. Awesome. So my name is Tumi. I am one of the training producers here at Informa Connect Academy. And what we do is that we are based in Dubai. We've been based in the Middle East for nearly 30 years now. So we are very experienced within the region, but we have offices all over the globe, and we are committed in providing solutions to your training needs all across the different industries. And so this here is looking at our personal development aspect here and how we can write messages to win. Who's going to be delivering this webinar this afternoon is our trainer called Paul Brollo, and he is a specialist in communication who focuses on organizational writing. He's worked for a not-for-profit, FTSE 100 company, and a micro business of one. And he really understands the pain points and the solutions that are needed for successful business writing. He's familiar with the region. He's been in the region, working here within the region for over 10 years now, in the capital, Abu Dhabi, Saudi Arabia, and he has vast experience with banking and energy companies in the region as well. He understands the issues that writers go through, and he is committed to supporting and encouraging all of us in this field that is so necessary. So, without much ado, I'm going to hand over to Paul because he is the man with all the answers today. So, I'll be here in the chat. Like I said, we want it to be as interactive as possible. So, please do use the box that has the question mark on it for Q&A. And obviously, please do chat in the comments as well. We'd love to hear from you. This call is recorded. The webinar is recorded, and so you'll have access to the recording shortly after it has ended. All right, Paul, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tumi. Thank you for producing this webinar, and thank you to all the participants for choosing to be here today. I'm looking forward to sharing my business writing experience with you, as well as my expertise in writing in a second or third language. And I'm looking forward to hearing your responses too. So please remember to use the chat feed. And please remember to let us know your thoughts and feelings as the webinar unfolds. Today, we're going to contextualize writing within the broader field of communicating at work. So we're going to be looking at writing from a wider perspective than just using language on screen or on paper. Like all your communication skills, writing is an essential professional competency which you rely on at every stage of your career. But unlike your spoken communication skills, your writing could become a permanent record of what you have said and done. And that record is proof of the degree and the quality of your contribution to your organization. These days, you have AI writing assistants who can produce any type of document for you, but you still have to supervise those assistants. And in particular, you have to prompt them, You have to fact check their responses, and in some cases, you have to rewrite the content to avoid plagiarism. If you want to manage an AI assistant effectively, then you should first know how to go about producing documents for yourself. And you can learn the step-by-step process on the certificate in business writing from Informa Connect Academy. You'll see the link on the screen, so if you want a complete overview of the content of the certificate, please just follow the link. For today, I would like to cover an aspect of communicating in writing which we do not have time to cover on the certificate. Today, I want to focus on your readers, and specifically, I want to focus on how they receive information from you, how they process that information, and what conclusions they reach as a result. I'm then going to use that process to give you a model for formulating messages, and that will be your key takeaway today. A model for formulating messages that will help you to get the results you would like to see. So the structure that I'm going to, the structure that I'm going to follow today is a 6-part structure. We're going to start by looking at how readers comprehend your meaning. Reading will always be as important as writing, and reading will always be a matter of comprehension. So to write well, you have to know how others understand or comprehend meaning. Part 2, where do people look for information? You are probably overwhelmed with information, and you have probably developed ways to cope with that information overload, and so have your readers. One option for coping with information overload is to select where you look for the information you want. So we're going to be looking at the places people are most likely to look for information. Part 3, how do you gather information? Well, comprehension is not only about allowing some types of information into your awareness. Comprehension is also about blocking other types of information out at the same time. To know what kind of information is likely to get through to you, or to your readers for that matter, you have to first know how comprehension filters work. Part 4, how do you evaluate what you know? To reach a conclusion, you have to process the information you have. At the same time, the processing style you choose shapes the information you have to make it more relevant to you. And your readers do the same thing. To know how the way that you process information is likely to affect the conclusions you reach, you first of all have to understand how processing information works. It'll lead us on to how readers make decisions. Decisions might seem to appear or not appear randomly in your mind, but they are always the result of a process which you have followed, one which might have been unconscious, and so do your readers. To know how you make decisions based on the conclusions you reach, you first have to know how the process of deciding works. And all of that will lead us into part 6, which is how to formulate winning messages. And this is where you'll get the key takeaway for today, which is a model for formulating messages which are likely to create results. Messages take a specific form, and so you can learn how to formulate them. The more you know about how your readers comprehend your messages, the more likely you are to formulate messages that stick in your readers' minds. So let's start at the beginning. First of all, how do your readers comprehend your meaning? As you know, I hope, communication is a two-way process. Someone has to send a message. We call this person the sender, and someone has to receive that message. We call this person the receiver. And then the receiver has to respond to the message. Now, that response is essential. The receiver's response shows the sender how he, she, or they have interpreted the message. Without that response, the sender cannot be certain that the receiver has understood accordingly. As a result, communication must be a two-way process. And as a further result, if your receiver does not respond according to your intentions, then you are the one who has not communicated. Now, this leaves two vulnerabilities in the system. So one, the sender might not formulate messages clearly enough with what we call intention. So we see that sometimes writers don't think about their intentions clearly enough. But even if the writers do think about their intentions, then receivers do not always interpret messages according to those intentions. And these two vulnerabilities, a lack of intention in the sender and a lack of comprehension in the receiver, makes us all open to what we call the blame game at work. And of course, that's very destructive for working relationships. Today, we're going to explore how people interpret meaning, and specifically, we're going to examine Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung's model of the human mind based on his book, Psychological Types. So you will be able to follow this link to find a copy of a book or to find a version of the book online. And the second thing we're going to do is take Carl Jung's psychological types theory and adapt that to a marketing model which has been tried and tested. And this will be the key takeaway for you today. I'm going to share the marketing model with you, and I'm going to adapt that model to Carl Jung's theory of psychological types and also to working in the modern workplace where people are very, very influenced by the pressure that they're under, particularly the time pressures. So the key thing that you should take away from part one is that communicating is complex, and you might have at least 4 steps to the process. You have to formulate a written message with intention, and you can learn how to do that on the certificate in business writing. But the thing that you can't learn how to do is to influence the way readers receive those messages. And at the moment, people are very distracted with all the different types of media which are available to them in the workplace. People just have to process messages, and people don't always read with enough attention to detail. And finally, they have to act on those messages, and you have to measure the response you get with the intention that you had to begin with. Today, I'm going to show you how to formulate those messages in a way that anticipates the way your readers are most likely to interpret them. My intention is for you to be in a position to formulate messages that are more likely to produce the results you want to see. So let's start off by finding out a little bit more about you and why you chose to be here today. You should see a poll on your screen in a moment with the question, what are your biggest challenges at work when writing to others? You may choose more than one response. And because you might need a bit of time to figure that out, I'm going to give you approximately 40 seconds. But if you need more time, Tumi will accommodate you.
Poll closed now, Paul. Thanks.
Thank you, Tumi. Could you share the results with us? It would be interesting to see what kind of proportion we have in the room. Thank you, Tumi. Okay, so it seems like for the majority of people in the room, readers are not, or receivers are not responding appropriately, and you're not learning from your experiences, which is very problematic generally for team development. But there's just a high level of people who have recipients who don't read emails. It's good to see that a very small percentage of people do not dread writing at work. It's good to know. And it's good to know that you understand that writing is about record keeping. and that's crucial um, to why we write at work. To me, if you'd like to bring the poll down, and if you have any questions for me about the first part, now would be a good time to share them.
No questions, but we did have a contribution, which I guess is another pain point. Someone mentioned that, Craig mentioned that I don't know, another poll option could have been, I don't know if they've read or received my intention. So another kind of pain point that some people may go through.
Yeah, so what that sounds like to me is that sometimes your message goes out into the void and you don't know what happened to it. Did people read it? Did people understand it, etc.? Good.
Definitely.
So this is one of the challenges we face, that sometimes we feel like we're communicating in a vacuum. Now, here are some tools and some tips and some next steps for you to help readers to understand your messages more clearly. We're assuming here that people are reading your writing, but if you make that assumption, then you can use subject lines, summaries, headings, and subheadings to help your readers to navigate your contents. As a general tip, use complete statements in any headings or subject lines rather than keywords. So put the most important point into the subject line or into the heading or the subheading, because many people will only read those parts of the document. You can also learn about top-down and bottom-up paragraphs on the certificate in business writing, and that is another way that you can influence the way that people receive your messages. So the second part that we're going to look at today is, where do people look for information? And I'm going to talk about attention and awareness in very specific ways today. So I'm going to define those words as I shall be using them, and I'm going to try and use them consistently. Attention is like a flashlight in the darkness. You can illuminate in detail whatever you shine that spotlight on, but you can only illuminate a limited number of items at a time. In other words, attention allows you to know something clearly, but it requires you to give up wider awareness. On the other hand, awareness is like street lighting at night. It can illuminate a wide range of objects, but they are generally quite dim, and so you don't see a lot of detail in those items. So, in other words, awareness allows you to have broad knowledge of what's going on, but you don't always have a degree of detail. Now, you should notice your attention and your awareness at work if you are in an open plan office. You might be able to filter out all the ambient noise to concentrate on a particular task, and that's using your attention like a flashlight. Or you might not be able to filter that noise out, and so you might need to go to a meeting room instead. And that's what happens if your attention becomes more like awareness. So we're going to be talking today about where people direct their attention. And you have two possible ways or directions that you can go in. And first of these is, you can direct your attention inwardly, or you can direct your attention outwardly into the world around you. Now, the important thing to remember is that you can focus your attention in both directions, and you can also switch the direction of your attention at any time when you choose, but you tend to focus your attention in one direction more than the other. So everyone has both an inward and an outward direction of attention, but they tend to prefer one of those directions more than the other. So we could call this a resting position for your attention. So your surrounding world includes all the people and the things in that world. And when you focus more on your surroundings, you are extroverting your attention. And your inner world is about what happens inside of you and your inner life. And when you are focusing your direction in that attention in that direction, it means that you are introverting your direction of attention. Now, I just want to clarify the meaning of these words, extrovert and introvert, because people have misused them quite a lot in the workplace. To extrovert comes from Latin, where the word extra means outwards and vertere means to turn. So to extrovert your attention means literally to turn your attention outwards. In contrast, to introvert your attention also comes from Latin, where intro means inwards and vertere again means to turn. So literally, to introvert your attention means to turn your attention inwards. So if you're thinking about attention being like a flashlight in the darkness, which illuminates things in detail, then if you're focusing your attention outwardly, you're going to know the outer world in more detail. But you might be aware of your inner world, you just might not have the same level of awareness. And of course, if you are focusing your beam of attention inwardly, then you're going to know the inner world in great detail, but you might have less or a very broad awareness of what is going on around you. So that's quite important to remember because many people have misused these words, and as a result, there's some confusion. The key thing to take away from this section is that the direction of your attention, whether you prefer to focus outwardly or inwardly, affects your awareness in the workplace, because you will have detailed knowledge either of what's going on outside of you or inside of you, and very broad awareness of the other area. So you might be more focused on the people and the resources surrounding you or on the power structures between them when you focus outwardly, or you could be more focused on your personal levels of comfort, safety, and interaction at work. And that's when you focus your attention inwardly. In terms of writing at work, the direction of attention affects the way that you formulate messages and the way that other people interpret them. So one thing that can go wrong in the process of sending and receiving messages is that you might be more focused on either the inward effect or the outward effect, and the receiver might be focused on the opposite area of attention. So before we go on to how people know things, I'm going to just give you a chance to respond to the direction of attention. I'd like you to think about where you tend to focus your attention the most. And you're going to see another poll on the screen, and you should choose one or the other. And we think you're going to need about 30 seconds to respond. But Tumi will decide when to close the poll. Thank you.
Can we see the poll results, please?
Thank you, Tumi. So we see that 2/3 of the group today focus more on what is going on around me. So approximately 2/3 of our participants today focus their attention outwardly, and approximately a third focus their attention inwardly. Thank you very much for sharing that information. It's a good idea for me to have a sense of where people are focusing their attention. Now, if you want to know more about how you focus your attention, notice what happens when you're under pressure. Because when you're under pressure, you fall back on your preferred or known way of working. Remember that extroversion and introversion are not things that you are. They are things that you do. And of course, it means your audience is doing the same thing. And if you would like an accurate indication of your personality type according to Carl Jung's theory of psychological types, then please go to the personalitymandala.com at personalitymandala.com, and you can read the terms and conditions and the privacy policy on the website and find out how to receive your free type indication from the website itself. Okay, so far what we've done is we know that there's a direction of attention which affects what you know. Either you're getting information from what's going on around you, or you're getting information from what's going on inside of you. But you also use something called your knowing function to find out what is happening. In other words, once your beam of attention is focused in a particular area, you still have to know what is going on in that area. And you have two ways of knowing. You can either know through what we call sensation, which is your five senses or your instincts, or you can know through what we call intuition. Now, intuition is complex, so the easiest way for me to explain intuition is to say that it's knowledge from somewhere other than your five senses. If you're someone who relies on your senses and your instincts, then it might be difficult for you to imagine where else knowledge could come from. But if you are someone who relies on your intuition, you'll know that there are many different ways that we know things that don't come from our senses or our instincts. So sensation makes us very aware of the reality of this world, and it's usually to do with tangible quantities in the here and now. It also deals with things like cooperation and, of course, competition too. But generally, it's about hospitality, in other words, how we live with each other and what we experience. So, experiencing harmony or well-being. So, you're going to notice that all of those experiences are to do with how we use our senses or our instincts to live with each other. Intuition, on the other hand, is going to be the truth of what we could call the other world. So very often this is about an alternative reality to the one that we can know through our senses. It involves ideas, concepts, and symbols. So any ideas that we have, like justice or fairness, will be something that we can't know through our senses. It's something that we have to get from somewhere else. And sometimes people refer to this as the hereafter. So we assume that this is to do with an alternative reality. Intuition is more about discipline than cooperation. So deciding what the right way is to live. In other words, following your conscience. It often involves sacrifice because sometimes it means giving up physical experiences in order to develop intuition or to connect to something transcendent. And it often involves metaphysics, which is really about transcending this reality. So again, just notice whether you prefer sensation or intuition, and try to imagine what the world looks like from another person's perspective. The most important thing to remember is that your knowing function affects your awareness at work. So if you're using outward sensing at work, you're going to be interested in tangible quantities, physical resources and activities, and industries like construction, manufacturing, and logistics. So people who work in those kinds of industries are almost certainly relying on outward sensing. Those who are relying on outward intuiting at work are going to be working with intangible quantities like ideas or concepts. And this includes collective morals and principles, so how we should live together in communities, and that could include systems of law, governance, and society. So very often you can tell when someone is relying on outward intuiting by the fact that their focus of attention is more on concepts like fairness, justice, equality, etc. Inward sensing at work involves tangible needs that people have in the workplace, like individual safety, well-being, and cooperation. And inward intuiting often involves intangible needs for individuals, like individual morals, principles, or ethics. So when you find yourself focusing on whether you can live with yourself in the workplace or in the industry that you're working in, that's often you relying on your inward intuition. So please remember that the two directions of attention, inward and outward, combine with the two functions of knowing, sensing, and intuiting to end up with four options: outward sensing or intuiting, and inward sensing and intuiting. I'm going to ask you to think now about which knowing function you prefer. So the question here on the poll is, how do you know, I like to find things out at work? And you may choose only one answer. So we estimate that you're going to need approximately 50 seconds to choose, but I'll let Tumi handle that. Thank you, Tumi.
Great. Could we see the results, please?
Lovely. Thank you, Tsumi. So it seems that the majority of people in the room are using what we call outward intuition. So nearly half the group is focusing on outward intuition. So it means that two-thirds of the people in the room are focusing outwards, and at least half of the group are focusing on forms of guidance, particularly tangible guidance. And then we've got a percentage of people who like to find things out for themselves. For those of you who are looking inward to communicate, you're focusing more on inward sensing, and that's very focused on hospitality and harmony. And we have a small percentage of people who are using inward intuition. So that's very helpful for me to see that we have so many people here who are interested in outward intuition in the workplace. Thank you very much for participating. So just remember the key things about outward knowing or inward knowing. Make sure that you organize the facts that you have within your policies or procedures. So contextualize knowledge or information within policies and procedures, and that way you're always safe. Get into the habit of collecting facts about your work using an established system within your organization, like a risk register. So constantly capture information so that when you need it, you've got it available to you. And form hierarchies of information when you are communicating with other people to help them to navigate. Now, if you want to learn how to create hierarchies of information, you can do so on the certificate in business writing. For today, we just want to say that you need to organize the information to help people navigate that information. Okay, so what do we have so far? We know that the knowing function affects the way that you evaluate. So the different kinds of knowledge that you get from your senses or your intuition will affect the way that you process that information. And evaluating is looking for the value of what you know. And there are two ways that you can evaluate your knowledge. You can evaluate it through your emotion, or you can evaluate that through your reasoning. So we call these two functions of evaluating feeling and thinking. I'm going to break that down a little bit more for you. We all have emotions, but not everybody uses their emotions to evaluate what they know. But if you are someone who uses your feelings to evaluate what you know, you're going to notice that you're interested in engaging with other people, in motivating yourself and others, focusing on what you can achieve and what approval you will receive in return, looking for acceptance, belonging, and relatedness at the workplace. So using feeling to evaluate is not the same as having emotions. It's about focusing on the emotional aspect of any conclusions that you draw. So what impact is this going to have on people? In contrast, thinking is about using your reasoning. So thinking outwardly will involve developing a strategy or a plan, using tactics to achieve that strategy, being focused on results and outcomes, looking for analysis and synthesis, and using logic to form arguments. So again, thinking is about considering the impact on objective elements like the organization or the processes. So once again, we see that the evaluating function which you use influences the conclusions you reach at work. If you're focused on outward feeling, you're going to be interested in the impact on the people around you. And inward feeling is going to be about the impact on you and the people who matter to you. Outward thinking is going to be looking at generally where the organization is going. And inward thinking is going to be about how the organization gets there. And of course, if you combine the direction of attention with the knowing function and the evaluating function, you're going to end up with 8 different options, which we're going to explore in a moment. Before we do that, I would like you to spend a moment thinking about how you like to evaluate. So how do you reach a conclusion about the value of something for you? So if you want to work out if something is good or bad for you or for your organization, what do you usually do? You should see your poll on the screen now. You may only choose one response, and we estimate you're going to need approximately 45 seconds to choose. I'll hand over to Tumi to run the poll.
Great. Could we see the results, please?
Lovely, thank you, Tumi. So we see that nearly 2/3 of the room are using inward thinking to evaluate what they know. And that's thinking about the impact on the processes that we use. And approximately 1/3 of the room are using outward thinking. So generally what we're seeing in the room is the majority of people are looking outwardly, using outward intuition to know what is happening, and then using thinking to evaluate what they know. Thank you for sharing in the poll. That's very helpful.
Cool.
Let's talk. Yeah.
Sorry, before we move on, we just had some questions about awareness and attention in communication with
Okay.
intuition. Can I ask that here?
Yes, go ahead, Jimmy.
Great. So I think you may have made it clear. But to summarize, what would you say? How would you differentiate between awareness and attention?
That's a good question. So let me just put it back up on the screen.
Thank you.
Can you see my diagram with the flashlight and the street light?
Correct, we can.
Lovely. So attention is focusing on something. So attention is like a beam of light that you focus in the darkness. It allows you to see something clearly or in detail, but it's very narrow.
Mm,
It's not very wide. Whereas awareness is like a street light. So you might be able to see a lot of things when something is illuminated by a street light, but you can't see them in detail. It's very broad.
mm.
So attention is focused and awareness is wide and diffuse.
Great. That's well explained. Thank you so much. And this was just a question that an attendee asked, and he said that sometimes he has to sit in silence um, when he's trying to think about how to communicate in an email. And so he was asking if that is intuition in the way that he processes that.
Well, that's a wonderful question. I'm tempted to say straight away that sounds like intuition because we notice, for example, that when people are praying or when people are meditating or when people are reflecting, that they are using something other than their senses to become aware.
Mm,
And that very often that happens in silence. I know that in many cultures people pray aloud, but in many cultures people also pray silently. So it sounds like intuition to me. I think what I would ask that person is where is the information coming from? Does it come from your senses? Are you hearing it? Are you seeing it? Or do you become aware of something despite your senses?
sure, that's really helpful. Um, really helpful. Thanks, Paul. Please do continue. You're about to do the tips and evaluation for knowing, I believe.
No problem. Let me just make sure I get back to the right slide.
Thank you.
Okay, so remember that deciding is not the same as knowing or evaluating or concluding. So there are four things that should happen before you conclude. You should be using your senses to know the facts, using your intuition to understand the implications, using your feelings to consider the impact on people, and using your thinking to plan a way forward. Then you draw conclusions which should lead you towards your objectives, and then you should be doing the deciding. So making decisions is a complex process, and most people probably make decisions too quickly and don't consider things in enough depth. Now, remember, good teams are made from people who are different to each other. So don't give in to the temptation to work with people who are exactly like you. It's a good thing to work with someone who's different, but you must be able to complement each other. So you've got to make sure that both people understand that they are different, but agreeing to work together. So you do need harmony in the workplace. Now, you can learn more about how to document your decisions on the certificate in business writing. For today, I want to just wrap up with a little bit about decision making before I show you the key know, evaluate, and do model, which is your key takeaway for today. You're going to see that the model that I'm going to show you is based on how people make good decisions. So first of all, you have to know something, which you will know through either sensation or intuition, or both if you are being mindful. You have to evaluate what you know with thinking or feeling, or both, again, if you're being mindful. And then you have to come to a conclusion. Now, it's very important that the conclusion you come to must follow from what you know and from the value of what you know. One of the mistakes people make with decision making is that they don't follow through logically to a conclusion before they make a decision. At the moment, we're seeing a lot of misinformation in our society, which could be the result of people not being able to draw logical conclusions from what they know or their evaluation. So please remember, decision making is a process. It's got more than one step. And as a result of how complex consciousness is, you will have something called a primary function. That'll be one of the four functions of your mind. So either one of the knowing functions of sensing and intuiting, or one of the knowing, evaluating functions of thinking and feeling will be what you call the primary function. Now, using the primary function, we see that people will draw conclusions based on what is important to them. And because if you combine the two directions of attention with the two ways of knowing and the two ways of evaluating, you end up with 8 different value systems. So people whose primary function is outward sensing are going to value freedom of experience. In contrast, inward sensing is going to value coordinated experience. Outward intuiting is going to value collective responsibility or civic responsibility, and inward intuiting is going to value individual responsibility. Outward feeling will value public achievement, and inward feeling personal relatedness. And finally, outward thinking is going to value hierarchies of power, and inward thinking is going to be about processes and procedures. Now, you might use both your knowing function and your evaluating function, but you're going to have a primary function, which is the one you rely on the most. So in the next activity, I'm going to ask you to choose only one of those 8 statements as being the one that's most likely to be like you. So which of these 8 statements describes the conclusions you're most likely to draw? And don't forget, you should see the poll on your screen. You should have only one choice, and you've got a minute to decide. But if you need more time, let Tumi know. Tumi, I'll hand over to you now.
Okay, can we see the poll result?
Lovely, thank you very much. So it seems that a quarter of the group are drawing conclusions based on the best interests of the majority of people. So that's a very collective way of seeing things, considering the impact on most people. And then we have a relatively high percentage of people focusing on learning from past experience or how it affects teams when they work together. But the highest percentage of people, so nearly a third, are looking for ways to make it more efficient. So most of the decision making within the group is inward decision making. We don't see anyone choosing to turn it to our advantage. So that sounds like a very ethical way of thinking about things to make sure that it benefits more people or that it's good for everyone and done well. And a minority of people making things excellent for the sake of excellence, and some thinking about whether we should do it for experience. So mostly inward decision making, and that sounds very positive because it's focused on doing things well or efficiently and impacting on other people. Thank you very much for sharing that with us in the group. Okay, so don't forget that people who finalize decisions in your organization need knowledge and they need evaluation and they need conclusions and recommendations at the right time. So an important part of how you organize yourselves is to make sure that the people making the recommendations have covered the stages of knowing and evaluating appropriately. Now you can learn more about reaching conclusions and making recommendations on the certificate. For today, I want to show you something called the Know, Evaluate, Do model, which applies the decision-making process to the structure of writing. And they're effectively three things that you should include when you are formulating a message. You should ask yourself, what does your reader know? Bearing in mind that some people know through tangible experiences and other people know through intangible values. Your readers might or might not be the same as you. How should your readers evaluate? Bearing in mind again that some people will know through considering the impact on people, and other people will evaluate through considering the outcome and the result. And finally, what do you want your readers to do? Now, there should be two parts to that. You should have drawn a conclusion, and then you make recommendations based on the conclusion. The conclusion should follow from the information you've presented, and the recommendation should follow from the conclusion. So you have a degree of acceptable repetition in a message. So when you write short messages to people, whether you're writing them in emails or in briefing papers or even in longer documents like reports, just remember to always structure the messages using three parts. First, tell your readers what they need to know. It might be facts or it might be policies, but they need to know something to begin with. Then tell them the value of what it is you are asking them to know. So be very explicit about the value of this. Is this about the impact on people, or is it about the impact on results? Is it about both? And finally, be clear about what you want people to do and make sure that what you want them to do follows from what you've told them to know and what you've told them about the value of what they know. So make sure those three things follow from each other. This is one of the biggest mistakes that writers make, is that they don't draw conclusions which follow, and they don't make recommendations which follow either. So here is an example of the Know, Evaluate, and Do model from a document written at work. So in this example, the first thing I want my readers to know is that our customers expect us to have a reliable business plan for meeting the environmental challenges that we are facing. What I want the readers to understand in terms of the value of this is that we do not have the capacity in-house to engage with those customers. So once we've processed this, we see that we don't have this capacity. And as a result, what I want the readers to do is that we should partner with another organization which has the capacity to deliver the strategic outcome for us. So in this case, I've chosen outward intuition because I'm using the business plan as a way of working out whether we're meeting our goals. And then I've used outward thinking as a way of working out the value of this. It's not helping us to achieve what we want. And then the recommendation again is based on outward thinking, which is we need a strategic partner. Okay, now learning how to use the know, evaluate, and do model can be very complex. So be patient with yourselves while you're learning to do it. And learning how to apply Carl Jung's psychological types can also be difficult. So let's just experiment a little bit with the following interactive activity. I'm going to give you 4 statements below, which represent one function each. And what you should do is decide which of those functions the statement represents. So you're going to have to make 4 different choices based on 4 statements. Tumi, I'm going to hand over to you because I know you figured out how to run this activity with the group.
Sure. Thanks, Paul. So as you can see, I put the statement in the
Jimmy,
chat.
your audio is a bit low.
My mic was not up. What a rookie mistake. Thank you. So as you can see, the statement is in the chat. And then it says option 1 and option 2. Option 1, knowledge from senses, and option 2, knowledge from intuition. And we'd love just for you to put 1 or 2 to show us what do you think this where this information has come from. Once we've got a few responses, I'll put it on statement 2 so we're not overwhelmed with the different statements coming through. Okay, so far, Paul, we have some options. 1. Oh, we've got someone saying option 2. I think people are okay. We've got option 2.
Tumi, people can also give us their reason if they have time and they feel like explaining why they chose 1 or 2. It'd
I
be
think
interesting to hear reasons.
because of time, maybe we'll do like this statement and then the second statement because of time,
Okay.
so we can really get into it. Okay, so we've got, it seems quite mixed here. Would anyone like to say what their reasons were? Okay, so we said option 2 because there seems to be an outward focus. And someone said again here that they've chosen option 1 because intuition is not the way out. We have another reason here, and they have chosen option 1, and they said because it was based on salary information and data. So Paul, do you want to put us out of our suspense and let us know which option it was?
Well, if I'm pronouncing the name correctly, it looks like Antara Saha is correct by saying that this is sensory information because it's based on salary information and data. So well done, Antara. That's the correct answer.
Great. I'll put the second statement up because we do have 5 minutes, and I do want to open up to conclude, so you can conclude, and also if there are any other questions. So
Tumi,
I'll put,
if you would like to do the questioning straight away, and we can put the statements into the chat feed, people can do that in their own time if they want to stay on. But if you'd like to move on to questions, we could do so.
yeah, so I've just put the second statement up, and then you can then continue. So people are not distracted with the statement and also trying to listen to what you're saying as well. So this is the second statement here. So we've got here, lawmakers in the United Kingdom decide how others should receive income support from the government, but these lawmakers have never had to use the system they've created. So is it knowledge from senses or knowledge from intuition? Over to you guys. I think people are taking a bit more time to answer now. Oh, okay. So we have 2 answers coming at the same time, saying 2, 1. Okay, we've got oh, it seems quite balanced with options 1 and 2. I feel like we're in a tie. Okay, more option. Okay, it's quite tied, these responses. just as one option's coming into the lead, the second one comes up into the lead. Again, would love to hear some responses for why, just before we move on and conclude. Who would like to tell us why they've chosen these options? Okay, so we have option 2 because the lawmakers are not experiencing what the user experiences.
Mhm.
So
Well,
we've
I
got
like
option.
Craig's way of explaining his choice. Number two is correct. And it's interesting that Craig chose to focus on experience, which
Mm,
is true. They're not experiencing things, so it's not experiential. But from a reader point of view, you'll see that those two ideas are not linked except in the mind of the writer. So the writer is making a connection between two things. And not everyone makes connections between ideas. Some people will just look at things and go, they are what they are. So because
mm,
there's a connection between the fact that if lawmakers are earning that much money, then they can't know what it's like to be claiming benefits.
yeah.
You
You
have to
also
make
here
that
said,
connection in your own mind.
yeah, someone also said 2 because they don't have first-hand knowledge.
There you go. And yes, Craig, well done. You are correct.
And yes, as mentioned before, the session is recorded and it'll be sent out to delegates afterwards. Okay, wow, time is fast spent. Okay, Paul, over to you.
So how do you want to do this to me? I'm happy to stay on if people would like to ask questions. I'm happy to run over, but I know people probably have to go away for other things.
Yeah.
So do you want to choose some questions from the chat feed, or do you want me to go through the frequently asked questions? And should we wrap up before we do that so that people
Yeah, I think
really,
we should conclude, and then
yeah,
as you're concluding, I can receive any questions. So if you want to say like your final points, and then
okay,
if there are any questions, and that will give people time to kind of formulate that.
lovely. So I'd like to thank all of you for being here today and listening to the webinar. I know you have been reading from the screen too, but thank you for receiving this information. And thank you so much for your participation in the poll. I'm going to run through some frequently asked questions now. But if you would like to find out more about Carl Jung's theory of psychological types, and if you would like to find out your psychological type based on his theory, you can use the Personality Mandala website, and you can also read my notebook with the essential website content, which explains everything in more detail, and it also has space for your own notes. So please go back and have a look at the content in more detail. You will get a copy of the slides, and you will also find the link to the business writing certificate on the slides as well. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure working with you today.
Thank you so much, Paul. There's been a lot of thanks and great distinctions, and you've even got some follows now, Paul. For
Yeah.
those of us that are still on, and there's still quite a lot of us on here, which is fantastic. I'd love just to see in the chat just maybe one word that you would use to describe the session that you've learned today, what you've taken. It could be a keyword you've learned today. It could be something using your intuition about how you feel in terms of outside of your senses. We've got insightful. Yeah, we just really love to hear some. So yeah, we're getting a lot of insightful coming up. Fantastic. Again, as you can see here, there's just a poll just to know who would be interested in attending a course to do with business writing, of course. We've got inside and outside, informative, excellent, writing introspection. Wow, the attention and awareness, the flashlight and the street light has really resonated with a lot of people there, um, Paul, which is excellent. Um, okay, okay, we are at 4:01 UAE time, and I am mindful of time. Okay, great. If we can close the poll for us, please. So as Paul mentioned, thank you so much everyone for your time. This session has been recorded. It will be sent out to you, and obviously because it's recorded, you'll get access to the slides, which you can see in front of you. You have the link so you can go and access the book and also check out the personality quiz, the personality mandala here. And as mentioned before, this is out of an in-depth course that Paul delivers and has the time to really go in depth and have work those examples with you. So again, Paul, thank you so much for your time, and your expertise has been plenty of value added. Thank you to you, our attendees, for the participation in there. It's been really great hearing your questions and your opinions. And until the next time where we run a webinar as such, it's been great for you to join us, and we really hope that you have a great day. Take care, everyone. Bye.
What if you and your team can be even more? Even more informed, competitive, accomplished, even more successful, with programs designed to inspire and empower everyone to become even more. Introducing Informa Connect Academy. With hundreds of global, digital, and in-person training courses led by world-renowned industry experts, reimagining learning experiences for even more unlocked potential. Informa Connect Academy, available at informaconnect.com/academy.